Welcome to the Tennessee Capitol and our Capitol building. It's an extremely beautiful day today and very peaceful out here on the Legislative Plaza. But last week, when special session was just wrapping up, it was a little bit of a circus. A small circus, but a circus nonetheless. Now, if you've been paying attention to the media and their reports on the end of special session, you probably know roughly what happened. There were no new gun control bills passed in the state of Tennessee, and the media on the left is saying that this is evidence of extraordinary fascism.
We chanted fascist because that's what it is.
And then on the right, this is evidence of extraordinary courage. So what is it? Why is it so extraordinary and amazing that we don't have any new gun control in the state of Tennessee? Is it a phenomenal victory, or is it just keeping ground that we already had? Well, the title of the video probably has spoiled the idea that I think that it is, in fact, both, and I will explain why. But first, we need a little bit of background on why the special session was called in the first place. It all started on March 28th when there was a school shooting right here in Nashville at Covenant Presbyterian, a church school. And it threw the entire legislature into turmoil. They were still in regular session. They had a few weeks left. And this school shooting, which resulted in the deaths of 3 adults and 3 children, and was perpetrated by a young woman who was claiming to be a young man, just was political dynamite. It happened to families who were very close to the governor. And protesters showed up, and the pressure from outside of the state and inside of the state to do some sort of gun control legislation in the few remaining weeks of session was tremendous.
Hundreds of parents, students, and community members rally at Tennessee's state capitol, demanding gun reform Thursday. Protesters surrounding the State House and then facing off with lawmakers inside, demanding a ban on assault rifles.
And to be honest, I think that the legislature here was in many ways unprepared for that level of political pressure, that level of protest, that level of disruption from not only people who showed up from out of town, but other legislators here in the House.
The drama unfolded a week ago when a trio of Democrats joined a gun-controlled protest on the floor of the State House. They used a bullhorn to join with protesters. The lawmakers' actions broke House rules of decorum, and Republicans used their supermajority to try to oust all of them.
And to give a little bit more backstory, they had just passed a bill banning gender reassignment surgery for minors and received a tremendous amount of scorn and mockery and hatred from the national press. So they were already reeling a bit from that. They were already sort of on the back foot when this happened. And I want to say that despite being fairly ill-prepared for that level of vitriol and hatred and professional protesters and activism that happened inside of this building, they actually handled things rather well. They refused to pass gun control legislation hurriedly, and they finished out their session without succumbing to the pressure, without bending the knee to the mob. And after session was over, they went home. That was when the governor declared that he was going to call a special session.
As I said, the specifics are yet to be determined, and there'll be much to work together. And I mean, we will have to work together in order to get this done. But I believe we can.
In the same way that school shootings always bring out media attention and emotionalism and certain types of calls for political action, calls for special sessions also bring about some level of political opportunism. And the reason for that is pretty simple. State-level legislatures like Tennessee are really only in session from like January till April or May. It's only a few months. So a special session gives you an extra week or two of lawmaking capability. But it is more than that, because during a special session, because they are designed to be called only for emergencies, it is an extraordinary situation that requires a special session. The rules are suspended. Not all the rules, but rules regarding the timing of bills and legislation. In a normal session, you have to take 4 weeks to pass a bill, from filing through the committees to finally being heard on the floor, and then also in the Senate, and then combined into a single law that has been passed by both sides of the legislature. In the special session, you have to do the same thing, but within 4 days. Now, I love speed, but laws should not be written hastily or passed hastily. They have a lot of consequences that need to be carefully thought through by people who know what they're talking about.
All it would do is say, we need to report more people and put them into the system. So it would send a number of people who now meet this new lower bar of risk to be evaluated in emergency rooms.
The definition is all over the board instead of a direct. Is that correct?
Right. It's creating a new standard, and I realize it seems like a small change, but it's going to have huge impacts on how we practice, and that's one of the unintended consequences.
Being able to pass bills faster with less due process is more appealing to certain people than others. And remember, this special session is ostensibly to be called in emergencies. And, you know, the old saying, never waste a good emergency. If you have the emergency and the emotions are running high and there's the opportunity to skip a whole lot of the boring checks and balances in the legislative process, that is an interesting and appealing opportunity for a lot of different people. And those folks came out. The governor asked for bills on 18 different topics, ranging from public safety to mental health, and of course, school safety and potentially firearm confiscation. Now, he did soften a bit on this point. At the beginning, in April, after session had closed and he announced that special session, he was very specifically calling for red flag laws, and very specifically calling for red flag laws like Florida's. Florida has a very powerful, full-blown red flag law, and that was what we were told we were going to get here in Tennessee. Now, over time, as there was pushback from various think tanks and constituents and even members of the T.REX Arms political mailing list, thank you very much, you guys, the term red flag law kind of soured, and the ideas behind it, the erosion of the due process and the Second Amendment rights, became a lot less appealing to a lot of people. Now, there are folks on the left that still think that red flag law is a phrase that flies under the radar of conservative thought, but I think 2023 is going to show us that that phrase, that little sidestep, is probably pretty poisoned at this point. By the time special session actually began in August 21, it was obvious that there was no support for a red flag law. But it wasn't for lack of trying. Again, the governor had pushed it, several people in leadership had pushed it, the left was definitely calling for it, Democrats were calling for it, Planned Parenthood was organizing political action groups and printing t-shirts with all of the different coalition partners who were going to be doing political pressure during the special session. Every town bought a ton of ads in Nashville for like $100,000. Moms Demand Action demanded action. There was a whole bunch of stuff preparing for a cataclysmic collision of different worldviews here in this particular house on August 21st. So, what happened? Well, there was kind of a lot of stuff that went on. Things began that first night with a lot of protesters doing a lot of stuff for a lot of media outlets, and there was immediately a lot of discussion on the rules. Some people wanted very, very, very few rules during the special session, because isn't that kind of the point? And then other people wanted some more rules because things definitely got out of hand back in April, and people wanted to try to avoid that level of disruption so that they could actually try to get some work done in a meaningful amount of time.
Where in these rules can we rule the speaker out of order when he shuts off members' microphones so they have to bring a megaphone to the House floor? Where in these rules can we hold the speaker accountable for abusing constitutional rights and misapplying the rules based off of a member's skin color, as opposed to treating every member in this body as an equal member? You can boo, but the truth will be told today.
That's out of order. That's out of order. Next.
It should be noted that a special session is relatively expensive. It is tens of thousands of dollars per day to bring the reps back and have them do their business. Plus, there was increased security because of protesters. And believe it or not, there were fewer protesters than were expected by everybody. Everybody from me to the Department of Safety and Highway Patrol expected far more protesters. And we're not entirely sure why all of them didn't show up. Maybe it was because it was over 100 degrees outside, and maybe there were some other reasons that I will get to a little bit later. But it is a relatively costly thing to bring everybody back here for an emergency special session, and a lot of people wanted things to go as quickly and as smoothly as possible. And the best example of this was the Senate. The Senate did the best job of actually narrowly focusing on a few specific bills. They picked 4 bills that would do some of the things that the governor had asked for, and they declared that they were going to only work on those bills. They would discuss them, they would amend them if necessary, they would pass them, and they would be done. Which is a phenomenally quick and efficient way to go.
Chairman Watson, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, get the day started. Mr. Chairman, I move we lay on the table the bill scheduled for today's calendar.
That is a proper motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second on that. Those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Watson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, move adjournment subject to the call of the chair.
All those in favor of adjourning, subject to the call of the chair, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Committee's adjourned, subject to the call of the chair.
By narrowing things down and closing committees quickly, they were able to really focus on things and make the most of what they wanted to be a very few days here in the Capitol. And a very few days being here on the Capitol surrounded by protesters and getting media attention that they didn't particularly want. In the House, things were a little bit different. It was disorganized. And I don't want to just put the blame on a few disruptive Democrats. The leadership of the House was not nearly as organized and focused as the Senate was. There was an awful lot of political gamesmanship that was going on, as opposed to just trying to solve a really simple set of problems and limit it to only that set of problems. There were some people who wanted to adjourn immediately, tell the governor that this was not an emergency and that there was no reason to waste the people's time and the people's money discussing non-emergency stuff in an explicitly emergency setting. But then there were other people who said, well, since we're here, we should do some work. And then there were other people who said, since we're here, we should do everything. Obviously, those folks didn't exactly get along.
What is one little Glock against an AR-15?
Representative Jones, that's not the bill that's before you, sir. You're out of order.
And remember, while all this is going on, the protesters are demanding very specific things. They don't want 114 bills. They don't want people to consider the governor's 18 points. They want basically one thing and one thing only, which is some kind of gun confiscation. They don't want more SROs in schools. They don't want better security for private schools. They don't want anything that isn't gun control of some sort. So a great example of this would be a bill that Chris Todd ran. Chris Todd is a friend to Tennessee and a friend to the Second Amendment, and he has pushed a number of pro-gun freedom bills over the years, and he had a very simple bill that said, if we are here to address public safety and school security, one of the best things that we can do is make it easier to get armed guards at school. So let us expand the number of people who are allowed to have firearms on school property from active duty SROs to off-duty trained police officers.
We've got retired officers that are asking us for this. We have current officers that are asking us for this, knowing they're about to retire, and they want to volunteer. They want to be a part of a school that may be in their neighborhood so that they can provide this no-cost security whatsoever. There's no cost to this at all. And those are the most trusted members of our community. So that's one of the reasons that we brought this. I'm not sure you could hear all that with the moaning and groaning going on, but I hope you could.
And that was apparently not cool.
You saw our hands up. We had our hands up from the beginning. We had our hands up from the beginning of this committee. We had our hands up. I'm not stepping out. I'm a member of this committee, so you can remove me. No, this committee is out of order. The chairman is out of order.
We're in a 5-minute recess.
The people of District 52 are being silenced.
I want you for a second to try to put yourself in the shoes of the representatives and realize that they are really between a rock and a hard place here, because the best thing for them to do for their constituents, whether they live in a Republican or Democratic district, is to increase the security of the schools and actually protect the young people that are there. And if they're from a Republican district, then most of the voters properly understand that. But The only people in the room are from the other side. And whenever they vote for something like increasing SRO funding, increasing security spending, allowing more police officers to be at schools, they get shouted down. They get called white supremacists. And then the media reports that they voted yes on bills that have been called white supremacy. So they have to hope that their constituents actually read something beyond the headline and actually continue to support them, or at least understand that they were upholding their oaths of office. And the other thing that happened was this gallery where I'm sitting right now was filled, filled is a bit strong. There were many protesters in this gallery shouting anytime that the Republicans did anything, and then the reporters were reporting that they weren't listening to the people.
You've done nothing! You've done nothing! You've done nothing!
So again, you have to hope that your constituents are paying attention to what is actually going on and reading something more than just the headlines. Local Republicans do not listen to the people, democracy dying, etc., etc. There were a whole bunch of people who were reporting that democracy was dead in Tennessee only because Republicans have, a majority.
We've been hearing a lot about Democratic backsliding and autocracy in America. If you want to get a real idea of what that looks like, take a look at what's happening in Tennessee.
In Tennessee, they are moving toward full-on fascism, the Republicans in that state.
Today was a signal that we have lost democracy in Tennessee and that we are on the path toward authoritarianism.
It's the voice of democracy getting slaughtered.
What the Republican legislature did was shocking, it was undemocratic, and it was without any precedent.
We chanted fascist because that's what it is.
Which brings me to one of the main takeaways from this particular special session. And it's nothing that we haven't said before. It is really important for you to get to know your local representatives so that you can continue to encourage them to do the right thing and to let them know that you are paying attention to what is going on. You are reading more than the headlines, or maybe you are, not reading the headlines. You are supporting the good work that they are doing, and you want them to continue doing it, even if the gallery is packed with people with signs, even if the media is calling them fascists, and if they do the incredibly hard, difficult work of saying no to an entire crowd that is spitting at them. You need to tell them that you have their back. And some of you are wondering where the governor was. Well, the governor didn't actually show up for any of the special session. And in one sense, that is fine. He's not a legislator. He's not part of the legislative process, so he doesn't really need to be here. But if he's going to call people, make them show up in the spotlight and face the music, then the least he could do is be here to catch his fair share of tomatoes. Now, he did authorize all of the police presence that was here, all the state troopers who were protecting the people and the property, so he did want to take care of folks, but he then didn't really show up. Meanwhile, the Senate did in fact stick to their limit of 4 bills no matter what, and they passed those 4 bills. They were a slight tweak to the way that handgun safety training is worded in the law. It requires information about safety and storage, which technically it already did, but it also makes gun safes exempt from Tennessee sales tax. So that is now a permanent change to the law. There was also a requirement for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to provide an annual report on human trafficking using resources that they already have, and a requirement for the Tennessee courts to notify the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation within 72 hours when there are criminal prosecutions, instead of the 30 days that it takes now. And that is something that is firearm related because it directly ties into the Tennessee background check system that FFLs use here. So if somebody is convicted of a crime, that database is supposed to be updated within 3 days instead of 30. So directly related to stuff that the governor was asking for, more or less. And then the 4th bill was an appropriations bill, which sets aside something like $70 million for mental health related costs in a bunch of different categories, and $40 million for educational safety stuff in a bunch of different categories, and $1 million for gun safety education. So all in all, I think that they did the best possible job of making the most of the special session. Personally, my emotional response was to say, do nothing, gavel out, go home, and tell the governor this is not an emergency. But since all the work and all the time has already been done, showing up and doing some things that will actually give some resources to people to do some different things, remove sales tax for things that people should already own, and tell TBI to do some stuff that they should already be doing, fine. Excellent stuff. Now, again, the House was continuing to be complicated and demand that the Senate's reopen committees so that they could discuss stuff further. But fortunately for everyone, the Senate held firm. And after 6 days of special session, the House realized that the Senate wasn't going to budge. They also ended their session, and that was it. 6 days of special session resulting in 4 bills and a whole lot of sound and fury that ultimately signified almost nothing. So why was it almost nothing? Why was it that all of the protesters and organization and all of the speeches from Bloomberg and other gun control people, why was it that all of the press didn't actually result in massive direction moving forward? There's a lot of people on the left primarily who have said that this special session was a waste, a complete and total waste, a waste of an emergency, a waste of emotional energy, a waste of organization and coordination, just a total wasted opportunity for gun control. Yeah, this was an incredible opportunity. The emotion was very high. The governor was on their side. The press was very much focused. There were things that happened that made it onto mainstream news for days and days and days. The pressure was super, super high. This was the golden opportunity for a red flag law in Tennessee, something that gun control advocates have really been wanting for the last 18 months or so. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but the main one was that over a year ago, the Supreme Court handed down the Bruen decision. The Bruen decision has completely changed gun rights and gun control in the United States. The precedent set by the Bruen decision is really, really good for the Second Amendment. And a whole bunch of gun laws have actually been struck down as a result of that. Over the last year, there have been more victories for gun rights than over the last 10 years before that. And so the gun control advocates are looking for kind of an end run around the Bruen situation. And red flag laws were something that really wanted to be tried. Now, there are already red flag laws in 21 different states, the blue ones, and there's probably going to be something coming up in Pennsylvania or Maine later this year. But Tennessee is the heart of conservatism. It is a red state with a Republican supermajority, all of the planets aligned. And if they could run this particular red flag playbook and get something across the finish line here, that would allow them to test some theories and continue to run this elsewhere. The fact that it stopped and didn't make it across the finish line is very interesting. Not just to me, but to a lot of people. Is it because the Senate just held a strong line from the beginning? I think that's really important, and we should never understate the value of what they did. Is it because the constituents were actually really quick to explain to their representatives what they actually were looking for? I think that is possible, and it definitely helped. Is it because everybody in Tennessee, politics, is a little bit better prepared to deal with the pressure tactics and the professional activists? I think that's a big factor too. Definitely more so even than this April. And that is a lesson that I think a lot of us can take away. Part of the reason that I think things were much quieter during the special session is because everyone realized that there wasn't going to be enough momentum. There wasn't enough outrage, there wasn't enough emotion, there wasn't enough support for significant gun control legislation. So they pulled back and are reserving those resources for next year regular session. A lot of those 114 bills that did not pass from special session will reappear, and we will debate them and we will work on them again. But also, the accusations that this was a wasted special session, that the Republicans run this state with an iron fist, undemocratically being elected by the people of Tennessee to a majority, which is a fascist thing, whatever those arguments are, all of those are going to be pulled out, dredged up, and reissued during election season next year. So we're getting to see, maybe not a preview of how red flag laws are run out, but during all of the stuff that went on, even though I agree that it wasn't a real emergency, I don't think it was as much of a waste as other people think. We got to see behind a lot of people's masks. We got to peek under a lot of rocks. And I think we have a much better idea of what could be happening in the future, as soon as early next year when we come back into session, and later on in the year when it is election time. So, even though I mentioned that protester presence was less than I expected, protester coordination was much better than I anticipated. A lot of these different leftist groups are working really well together. They collaborate even though they're working on issues that aren't necessarily their normal bread and butter. Planned Parenthood is the perfect example of this. Their business model is more in line with the school shooters. Planned Parenthood is the perfect example of this. They should not weigh in on this fight, but they are coordinating protesters for these type of gun control demands. Pro-freedom people should do a better job of working together, whether they're opposed to government overreach in the area of firearms, education, finance, agriculture, whatever. We could be working together a lot better. The other thing that I think we should be doing better is directly working with our reps. Reps should be more directly communicating with their own constituents and not professional lobbyists and professional pressure groups. But constituents needed to be doing a better job of connecting with those reps directly and not just assuming that the lobbyists and the pressure groups are going to get our stuff done for us.
Because this is the way that they're moving. And so it's not democracy. It is mobocracy. It is terror for our communities. And it is insulting to the victims of this mass shooting and their families that is the step forward that they're taking. And also to arm teachers as well. That was the other proposal they had. And it is so hurtful for our people who are grieving still.
We chanted fascist because that's what it is.
I think that is the perfect reminder that even guys at the state level need to be prepared for the kind of name-calling and intersectional politics that we see at the national level. We're used to seeing it in Washington, D.C., but those are the kind of tactics that are going to trickle down to the state and city level. So our reps need to be prepared to deal with that kind of thing, and you guys need to be able to support them so that when they are in a room full of folks like that just yelling and spitting and they know that the headlines are going to be so-and-so supports white supremacy, they need to know that we actually don't believe that. We actually do look at the facts, we read beyond the headlines, and we want them to uphold their oaths of office. So be prepared to do that in your own states, because I think that it has a tremendous effect. And I think that we saw that here in Tennessee. Some of the confusion and conflict in the House notwithstanding, the Tennessee legislature was better equipped to stand up to political pressure. And so even though all we did was retain ground that we already had, I see that as a pretty major victory considering all the resources that were arrayed against them. That is a pretty significant step forward. And I think that stopping red flag laws cold here in Tennessee in the special session is going to be really, really valuable. I think that costs a lot of momentum to a lot of different people. So the needle is really moving in a really positive direction. The judicial wins that we have had post-Bruin are significant. The ways that executive orders are being shut down is very powerful. And the win here in Tennessee is probably a lot bigger than it looks. So be encouraged, continue to watch what is going on in your state and key battleground states around the country, because there is a lot of work to do. If you would like to learn more about stuff that actually happened during the special session, like minute-by-minute, play-by-play stuff, we did 3 live streams on the T.REX Arms YouTube channel, which you can find by looking in the live stream tab or the podcast tab. And yeah, that's about 3 hours of content where we went over the 3 probably most important days of special session, and we had guests and we did interviews and had a lot of clips from the events and even cut in live footage from the floor and did commentary on it. So that is a little bit more boring and detailed, but if that's what you're interested in, check it out.